Call the regular council meeting of Monday, December the 9th to order. There is an agenda there in front of you. Can have a motion to adopt the agenda. Councilors Ady and Randawa. Any discussion, additions, deletion? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. I note this evening we've got Councillor Skelton Morven joining us by Zoom. We are now in the public comment part of the agenda. If there's any member of the public that would like to speak to any item that is on the agenda, you're welcome to do so now. Nobody's moving towards the microphone, so we'll move on. We have a consent agenda. First of all, there are council minutes for approval. There are minutes of the special meetings of January 22nd, February 12th, February 26th, March 11th, March 25th, April 8th, May 27th, June 17th, June 24th, and July 22nd. I will note there will be a small change in that on January 22nd, February 26th, and March 11th, Councillor Randawa was not shown, but he was in attendance. So when we approve the consent agenda, it'll be with that addition. We move on to the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting of February 26th and November 25th. There are minutes of the regular meeting of November the 25th. There's a report for approval from the Kitimat Terrace Thornhill Prince Rupert Mutual Aid Agreement to 24. There's also a report from the Director of Economic Development and Transportation with regards to the Business Facade Improvement Program through NDIT. There's also reports for receipt. There is a report from Planning with regards to the November development activity. There's a report from the Director of Corporate and Legislative Services with regards to bylaw stats. For October, there's proposed 2025 council meeting schedule. There's a report from the Fire Chief. For November 2024 monthly fire and rescue information, report from the Chief Financial Officer with regards to September 2024 financial report, a report from the Director of Development Services and City Planning with regards to the interim housing needs report update, and then there is correspondence for receipt North Coast Regional District November 2024 board highlights, as well as a letter from the Village of Nakusp to the Honorable Josie Osborne, Minister of Health, with regards to the BC Alert Ready program. I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda. Councillor Cunningham and Nish, anything you want to bring out or highlight? Councillor Ady.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the housing needs interim report, and there is a section there referring to underestimating the household growth, and I'm not sure whether there's somebody qualified to answer a question about that here, but the question that arises in my mind is that there's a discrepancy between the HNR method, which is prescribed by the provincial government, I think, in terms of how you estimate housing need, and what we anticipate may be the actual need reflected in new full-time jobs particularly by the port. And just as a bit of background, I know that the anecdotal reports, as it's footnoted there, refer to the redesigned Prince Rupert estimates. At that time, we were talking about possible potential population growth up into the low 20s. And then maybe a year ago, we had a presentation by people from the port here that had that number considerably less, but still significant in terms of growth. And it left me wondering if we actually have a need to create a more concrete dialogue to get a firmer idea of what the actual projections might be, so that we can then plan in more concrete ways for the actual best guess. I understand it's all projection, but it would be really good if we could get everybody on the same page around a collective best guess for the number of new homes that we need, because the difference is, it's clearly still a subject of discrepancy even in the interim housing report. So I'm offering that as a not very well worded question.
I think it's a very well worded question. Dr. Buchan, I see you've motion Director Pope to the microphone. Director Pope.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So that's correct. There is some discrepancy around projected housing need. The methodology prescribed by the province does not actually include anticipated need. It only is based on previous housing need. So if we wanted more specific numbers, keeping in mind that projections are always rather, can be not specific, then a more concrete number from the port would be valuable for that.
Mm-hmm. Councillor Hady.
Then I would suggest that perhaps we can move towards some kind of dialogue which helps us get there in terms of arriving at a common understanding between the ports, what the port anticipates and what we can therefore anticipate, so we have more concrete projections.
The other piece I'd add, and it's becoming apparent across the north, is that growth isn't always leading to growth in numbers. It's one of the reasons we end up with the taxation problems that we have, right? Is more jobs are often being filled in different ways, and it's a massive challenge. You watched Prince George go through massive growth in the early 2000s, and population dropped by 3%, closed 14 schools. I say massive job growth without what would have been the traditional corresponding increase in population. There needs to be a lot of work done, I think, on really trying to figure this thing out. Dr. Buchan.
Your Worship, this is the interim housing report. We anticipate going to a one that's not interim, a final, next version of final. So we will undertake to have as much concrete discussion as we possibly can with the Port Authority.
Perfect. Thank you. Councillor Cunningham.
In a housing report, I think we should be focusing a little more on the fly in, fly out. Like you say, jobs don't relate to housing in today's world. We're getting a lot of transient workers coming in, working. They're not Trigon or Alta or people like that are actually hiring people to work on the premises. A lot of these construction jobs and other jobs are people coming into town, having a rental unit or living in a trailer, as I met somebody just in the lineup at Tim Hortons, things like this. Although they're being captured as jobs, they're not in any way impacting our housing needs. Where in the past we've got this many people coming in, we need this much housing, when in reality, they're not really impacting housing at all, because they're bringing their own housing or they're staying at hotels and things like this.
Yeah. All right. If there's no other questions, thank you, Director Pope. If there are no other comments, Councillor Cunningham.
Just one on the bylaw stats for Director Miller. I know she'll be pointed to. I see the building permits and business license tickets and fines involved in that. I'm just curious, because usually you've got the building inspectors that find those things out in business licenses, or I'm quite sure they're bylaws.
So sorry, the question is,
why are building permits included in those stats? Is why I'm asking.
Director Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So anything that falls under bylaw does get captured by the bylaw system. So those bylaw stats are all together. When we receive a call, if it's related to the building department, we intake the call and then send it to the building department. So they work together very closely with the bylaw officers in terms of fines and ticketing. So it is all captured under the one.
Councillor Cunningham.
I'd be interested in how many people actually got fines for doing projects and then came in after the fact and got a building permit.
Is that a stat that can be captured?
Absolutely, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. All right. If there are no other comments or questions around the reports and the consent agenda, motion to approve, Councillor Cunningham, Councillor Niche. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. Actually, I think I had them moved and seconded already, didn't I? By those two gentlemen.
That is correct.
Thank you, Director Miller. All right. We move on to reports. We have report A. It's a report from the Chief Financial Officer with regards to the 2025 five-year financial plan bylaw number 3554. The council proceed with consideration for the City of Prince Rupert 2025 five-year financial plan bylaw, and that council directs staff to proceed with 2025 spending as proposed. Can I have a motion to that effect? Councillor Niche and Councillor Adey. Any comments or questions, Council? There's, I maybe I just highlight in the report. It identifies that based on conversations we had in our last meeting, the original proposed budget deficit was $1.628 million, which council wrestled with together with staff, and it has now been reduced to a $1.2 million general operating budget deficit, which needs to be made up through taxation. That's a 26% reduction in what the increase would have been, and brings the, if I'm correct, the tax increase down from what was proposed at just over 6.4% down into the mid 4% range, somewhere in there. Anyway, so there's an adjustment that's been made as council wrestled to try to protect taxpayers from the increases. Again, for the information of the public, this is the spending plan. The actual revenue plan isn't fully understood until all the assessments come in next year. So, being able to say specifically what the tax increase is can't be done until we get that information. Can I have a motion, please, to the recommendation? Oh, I have a motion. Gee, I'm going to do that all night long. Any further discussion or questions or comments, Councillor Randhawa?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, like we reduce like from 1.62 million to 1.2 million now, right?
Correct.
Budget deficit by redistribution of capital funding, right? And
Yes.
cancellation some asset management allocation. So I know we need bylaw officer, right? And so we, but I think redistributing capital funding to operating budget for this year we can make, right? This time no problem, right? We can give break to our residents, but for next year, right, like then we have to increase, or we have to find another money to compensate those operating my budgets, right? So that was a little bit concern for me. Like we are for next years, we putting more pressure on the operating budgets there, and we have to increase to make that one deficit there. So that part, I think I'm not in favor of that.
Dr. Buckney, do you have any comment or?
Your Worship, I think that more data will come in terms of what the city may be looking at, if any, for additional revenues, and at that point, you'll be able to determine what the impact will be on operating budget. We are anticipating additional revenues over the next few years, and significant additional revenues. That may help immensely with the question. I don't say that it'll make things easy, because you still have $500 million of infrastructure deficit that you have to find a way to finance. So there are certainly in the future difficult decisions to make.
Yeah. I don't know if you had any other comment, Councillor. Yeah. I think the challenge, and obviously, I mean, we've all wrestled with it. It's been very public, but the challenge is we've got a lot of old infrastructure. It's not, we celebrated with great vigor and celebration that we got all that funding put in place for the big project, and yet it's only doing a third of the pipes. It's not getting us to water filtration. It's not dealing with all of the sewage treatment that we need to do still, and many other things. We know that we've got a long list of things coming, and I wish the news was different. The good news is there are some new taxes that will be coming on the roll. The RIPET project, sorry, I gotta say this right. REAP project will come on, but not next year, right? There won't be substantial structures next year, but over the course of time, it will come on, and that'll be very helpful. But we've got a lot of work to do, and the next council has a lot of work to do. Any further comments? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. The next item up is the report from the Chief Financial Officer with regards to the authorization to borrow for Digby Island Ferry refit. The recommendation is whereas under Section 175 of the Community Charter, Council may incur liability, and whereas Council adopted the 2024 5-year financial plan amendment bylaw number 3529 on May 6, 2024, therefore be it resolved that Council gives authorization to borrow from the Municipal Finance Authority $670,000 for funding the Digby Island Ferry refit, repayment of which to be made over 5 years with no provision for renewal, and that is a refit that's already taken place. Can I have a motion? Councillor Niche, Councillor Skelton Morvan. Any discussion, comments, or questions? Councillor Niche.
Just maybe if we can get a highlight of, or I should say a low light of why it went so far over budget. I know it was a fairly big refit with the repowering of it, but just maybe an explanation as to what else happened to it.
Dr. Bucket.
Your Worship, I'll gather the information with the director and send that out to council once we've compiled it.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Cunningham.
Borrowing this money when we're getting close to our ceiling for borrowing, what is our debt load right now?
Dr. Buchan. Director, what's your name? Bombin. I'm sorry, I'm getting old and tired.
I'll have to get that information to you because I don't have it at my fingertips right now.
Councillor Randawa.
Yeah, and for the repayment, like we have to increase tax, or we have any plan for that?
Dr. Buchan.
Your Worship, I was just making a note. Could I have the question again?
Sorry, how is this being paid for? I mean, how are the payments being paid for?
The 670,000?
Correct.
Your Worship, I'll direct that to Director Bombin.
Director Bombin.
It's already been included in the 5-year financial plan for 2025.
There you go. Thank you. Any further questions or comments? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. We have a report from planning with regards to the development variance permit number 24 for 2410 for 974. It's actually, I think the address is 975. Am I wrong? I remember looking.
You are
today.
correct. The report says 975, Mr. Mayor.
975.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. 975 Saskatoon Avenue. The council proceed with the statutory notification process for the development variance permit number 2410. Councillor Ady and Councillor Randawa, any comments or questions? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. Report from the Deputy City Manager with regards to the water, solid waste, and subdivision servicing bylaw. Recommendation is that council considers fourth and final reading on the water utility management bylaw number 3549, 2024, and that council considers fourth and final readings on the collection and disposal of solid waste bylaw number 3550, 2024, with the fee schedule option number 2, and that council considers fourth and final reading on the subdivision and servicing bylaw number 3546. For folks at home, all of those bylaws are coming up later in the meeting for approval. These are the reports to them. Can I have a motion, please, to that effect? Councillors Niche and Councillor Randawa. Any questions, comments? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. There is a report from the Deputy City Manager with regards to the sanitary and storm sewer utility management bylaw, with a recommendation that Council considers the provision and use of sanitary and storm sewer utility management bylaw, bylaw number 3548/2024, with the attached fee schedule, which was option number 5. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Cunningham and Niche. Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. All right, so now we move on. Report from the planning with regards to complete communities plan. Recommendation is the council adopt the complete communities plan as indicated in attachment 1 and direct staff to begin actioning policy statements as budget and resources permit. Councillors Adie and Randawa. Any comments or questions? Councillor Adie.
I would just note that in the recommendations they're broken down into quick wins and short, medium, long term, and several of them I think refer to the subdivision bylaw. So I'm assuming that what that means is that although we may pass the current version, we're likely going to be returning for amendments. Is that correct?
Dr. Buchan. Director Pope.
That is correct. So the recommendation is to amend the subdivision servicing bylaw as recommended and or as staff see fit based on the recommendations.
Councillor Cunningham.
One question, why Urban Systems did this report, why aren't they here to present it? Because it's quite an extensive report. And, you know, a lot of the stuff in there is pretty obvious. We've discussed it numerous times over the last couple of years.
Right.
And, you know, I just found it really interesting. The more you read into it, the more in depth you got about walkways, closed things like this. This is all stuff we've discussed, and it'd be interesting to see what their observations, seeing as they were paid for this report.
Dr. Buchan, is that an option that might be made available to council?
Your Worship, I'm sure.
Was.
Your Worship, I'm sure that we could have them come up and present. However, that might be outside of the scope. I'll ask Director Pope to speak to whether or not it's included within the scope of the contract or whether it's an add-on.
Okay. Director Pope.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It would be an add-on, given that this was more of a decision-making tool, a data baseline assessment to support evidence-based decision-making. A report to council wasn't included in the scope.
Okay. So the question is that something that council would like? And it would cost,
No, it's
if it's going to cost money, no.
no. If it's going to cost us money, I think they've been well paid for this report. I don't see why they're not presenting.
Yeah. I encourage members of the public to have a look. It is an interesting report. It maps out the city for all kinds of different measures in terms of walkability and access to service and condition of sidewalks, and it's worth going through and seeing where your home is, and you know if it accurately describes how you would see your neighborhood. Councillor Cunningham.
Well, we're sort of passing this with the idea that action policy statements as budget and resources permit, and
correct.
Right now we don't have the budget or the resources to do it, so
correct.
It's kind of pie in the sky anyway.
Well, it may to a degree, I don't disagree, but it may inform work that we're already planning to do. For example, if we're going to tear up a street and put it back together, this may inform. Well, it will inform it undoubtedly. Dr. Buck.
Your Worship, in addition to your comment, which I agree with, the staff have been very successful in finding resources to get many projects done that outside of our taxation resource.
Good comment. All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. We'll move on to bylaws now. 7A is the City of Prince Rupert Subdivision and Servicing Standard Bylaw 3546, which was just referred to. The recommendation is that Council give fourth and final reading to the City of Prince Rupert Subdivision and Servicing Bylaw. Motion, Councillor Rendawa, Councillor Ady. Any discussion? If you are tuning in for the very first time and you're seeing us race through some of these things, it's because they've been well debated in previous council meetings. By the time we're now at fourth and final reading, it has been the subject of much discussion. All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. We have bylaw number 3548, City of Prince Rupert sanitary and storm sewer utility management bylaw number 3548. Recommendation is that council give first, second, and third reading to the City of Prince Rupert sanitary and storm sewer utility management bylaw 3548. Can I have a motion to that effect? Councilors Niche and Ady. Any discussion? Councillor Cunningham.
Well, now that we're into the meat of these bylaws, I'm really reluctant to pass these. I'll pass them because we have to, sort of, to keep the thing going and that, and they're self-funded. But when you look at the utilities in 2025 are going to be $1,773, and 3 years later they're going to be $2,503 if my figures are correct. That's a burden to the taxpayer. That's just, the utility rates have been, since they've been separated by taxes, have just been going up in leaps and bounds. I know we've got an infrastructure deficit in that, and it has to be done, but it's going to put a burden on the taxpayers. It's going to break some backs.
I'll separate your comment. It hasn't actually been increasing in leaps and bounds, which is part of the reason why we have to jump it up. It's been increasing 2% a year or whatever, not keeping up with inflation. And so that's part of our challenge. I agree with the conclusion that you make. It's going to be hard on people. And next year, I did the math on it. What did I see? I think we're looking at $129 increase in all of between the three utilities. So a little over $10, maybe $11 a month. Be lots of families that can handle that easily, and there'll be lots of families for whom that's a struggle. And I think we always have to be aware of that. Councillor Ady.
This one is the exception tonight in the sense that it's at first, second, and third reading, whereas the others at fourth. And I'm assuming the reason for that is procedural because we wrestled with this one a little more than the others. So this is a one step back in the process. And where we arrived at with it last time was a compromise around the notion of using funds that had previously been allocated elsewhere in the interest of reducing the debt incurred on the sewers. And the compromise was that we would take roughly half and commit it to reducing the debt, and the other half is held back. I guess what I'm curious about learning is what is now then the intention for the money that was held back, since it is not going towards the debt. If in fact that's been determined already, I would like to know what that is. And if it hasn't been determined, I would like to know what then the options are likely to be. And I think it would be appropriate to hear that prior to fourth reading.
Dr. Buchan.
Your Worship, the capital that is being held back, part of it is the line share is within Legacy, so council can't actually direct the corporation to provide those funds at this point. So there's an issue there, but in terms of how the capital is intended to be used, ultimately it's for capital projects, which will include, for example, Second Avenue. When we have to go and put Second Avenue back together, some of that scope of the work was outside of the funding that we have from the federal and provincial governments. We have to have funding to put it back together, the right way. And we I think probably are a little short on that now because of the decision to move some of the growing communities funding into reducing the debt on the project that's already been approved. That's just one example. In total, there's $500 million of projects that we are going to have to tackle over the next number of years. So, we could put together a long list of what those are. And the money that you're referring to is more immediate ones, maybe Second Avenue. It could be other ones. We can put together that list for council, but it's a long list.
Yeah. Councillor Cunningham.
When you refer to certain amounts of money can't be allocated to the debt we're incurring is capital projects and the interest we're going to be paying on that debt. So I don't see where it can't be used for some of the other capital projects to reduce this, but maybe Dr. Buchan could enlighten me.
I think the differentiation, Councillor, was not where it could be spent, but the mechanism through which, who gets to approve that. Council is not directly in charge of Legacy. Legacy is a separated board that makes separate decisions. Council undoubtedly has influence, but I think that's what Dr. Buchan, that's what you're referring to. Yeah.
Being the sole shareholders of Legacy, I think council can direct where that money goes. If
we have
so
a lot
decide.
of say over the directors and whatever, but there is we don't sit at this table and make those decisions. Councillor Adey.
So understanding that, but also understanding that at regular points, Legacy's financials become a matter of public record.
Absolutely.
I would assume then that the money transferred from Legacy to the city that is now not being transferred to the city for this purpose would show up as less, as a smaller contribution for this financial period.
I'm going to go to Dr. Buchan, but I wouldn't be surprised if Legacy comes back within the 2025 year with directing those funds. Dr. Buchan.
It's possible, but I can't say that will happen.
Yeah.
And the amount of funding that Legacy is putting into the city's operating budget is significant, but that the exact number is I don't have the tip of my tongue.
Other comments or questions? Councillor Randhawa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, like we already talked a lot about this one. Yeah, increase next 5 years is huge, right? Like, especially people with fixed income, their money not going that way.
Yeah.
But with all the roads and everything, we doing it, and so we have no choice, I think.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. It's I think future councils, maybe several councils in the future, will enjoy being able to have a lighter load on taxpayers and still get work done because there'll be other sources of revenues coming in. But we really are in a place where either we're going to get the work done or we're going to go lighter on taxpayers, right? And as you well know, my voice has always been, we got to get this work done, right? And there's more work right behind that work. There's the Third Avenue extension, and we could make a long list tonight. Anyway, all in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. Thank you very much. City of Prince Rupert Water Utility Management Bylaw number 3549. Recommendation that council give fourth and final reading to the City of Prince Rupert Water Utility Management Bylaw number 3549, 2024. Can I have a motion to that effect, please, Councillors Cunningham and Nish? Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. We have the City of Prince Rupert Solid Waste Management Bylaw number 3550. And I note, sorry, I should have said it when the water bylaws. We have a new document that's replacing what's in the agenda. You're well aware of that, council. But if you are following on an agenda from an online source, then we have the replacement bylaw that actually reflects the discussion that we had at council previously. And that's for the one we just passed, as well as for the solid waste management bylaw, which is the one we're about to discuss. City of Prince Rupert solid waste management bylaw number 3550. A recommendation is the council give fourth and final reading to the City of Prince Rupert solid waste management bylaw number 35502024. Motion, please. Councilors Niche and 80. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. We have the City of Prince Rupert 2024 5-year financial plan amendment bylaw number 3552. Recommendation that council give fourth and final reading to the City of Prince Rupert 2024 5-year financial plan amendment bylaw number 3552 2024. Motion, Councillor Adey, Councillor Niche. This is, just to be clear, because we're also going to discuss in a moment the 2025 5-year financial plan. This is an amending document that brings up, we pass these plans earlier and then we live them, and there's adjustments, that real world adjustments that just need to be made. And so that's what this 2024 5-year financial plan amendment bylaw is about. It's adjusting for the knowns of what has taken place so far in 2024. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. We have the City of Prince Rupert Revitalization Tax Exemption Bylaw number 3553. That council give fourth and final reading to the City of Prince Rupert Revitalization Tax Exemption Program Bylaw number 3553 2024. Can I have a motion? Councilors Cunningham and Niche. Any discussion? Councilor Adey. Oh, you're anticipating. All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. And we have the City of Prince Rupert 2025 5-year financial plan bylaw number 3554 with a recommendation that council give first, second, and third reading to the City of Prince Rupert 2025 5-year financial plan bylaw number 3554. Motion, please. Councillor Adey, Councillor Niche. Any discussion? Councillor Adey.
A question of curiosity, and it's really just my failure to fully understand everything about accounting. If you look at the years, if you put the 2024 plan that we've just passed under letter E and the 2025 plan that we're in the process of, one would assume, passing, and you look at common years, so 2026, 2027, you can see that some items are different when in fact they're still both projections. I'm wondering, so say the amount of revenue projected from the airport ferry, for example, is actually different in the two documents for 2026. Marginally, not big difference. I'm just curious as to what's at work there. Why would there be differences? And to cap the question, my assumption is that the 2025 documents numbers kind of erase the previous numbers in terms of being the projections that we go by.
I think your assumption is really good. We're going to find out. But I think your assumption is really good. I mean, that original 2024 financial plan, 5-year plan, was passed in 2023. And so those were the assumptions and whatever that was made in that time. The amendment document, I'm sure, has amended this year, 2024, but it's the 2025 document that's going to take forward looking. Dr. Buchan, you want me to go over? Director Bauman, prove me wrong.
No, actually, you're absolutely right. It would be presumptuous of us to put the 2025 5-year financial plan incorporated into the 2024 financial plan amendment bylaw before it was actually even given 3 readings, for instance. The 2024 amendment bylaw, the years 2025 through 2027, are based on some data that we had obviously for the end of 2023, which informed 2024 and then carried forward. And now, of course, 2025 financial plan itself is going to be for 5 years, and it's built on better data that we have experienced in 2024, and that just kind of builds on itself. So, but we don't want to be presumptuous that you'll accept the 2025 and put that into the 2024.
Thank you. Your assumption was correct, Councillor.
Perhaps my presumption may not be. We'll see.
All right, that brings us to the end of the bylaws. Council roundtable. Council, it's your turn. Councillor Cunningham.
Couple of things.
Sorry?
Mr. Mayor, you
Oh,
actually haven't
we should
voted.
vote on that?
Yes, if you
Okay.
wouldn't mind.
I like my presumption.
Democracy is such a funny thing. All in favor? Any opposed? Is that an opposed, Councillor Randawa? Councillor Randawa is opposed. It is carried. Councillor Cunningham.
Couple of things. First, sad to report that Gene Page died, our
Yes.
chief in charge of archives. So Gene's been there for quite a few years and was front and center on the archives. So she's going to be hard to replace. It's going to be an interesting transition.
Yes.
The other thing is, last council I got on a bit of a rant about the Quinitza station. I did some research. Well, first of all, we were going to get a report on the condition of it from building department. Did we get that?
Dr. Buchan, we got a
Your Worship, I'm going to ask Director Miller to respond to that.
Director Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Staff are working on that report, and we will have it available shortly.
Councillor Cunningham.
Okay, I did some research with the help of Dave Walker, who's Mr. Railroad in Prince Rupert. And there's a thing called the Heritage Railway Stations of Canada Act. It's a protection act. And Quinitza Station fits every category for that because it has to be more than 40 years old. It's 100 and some odd years old. It had to have been owned by a railway, which it was several times and things like that. So I will definitely pass the information I've got so far off to staff so they can look into it and possibly get it designated, because it then becomes funding by Parks Canada. So it's something, I know we don't have money sticking out of our pockets, but it's a part of Prince Rupert's history, Grand Trunk and that should be preserved, and definitely it's an attraction for the water.
Thank you. Any other, Councillor Adey?
I have a couple of things. Last Friday, I attended an event commemorating the loss of 14 lives at the École Polytechnique in Montreal. I'm not sure how many years later. It's in the 30s, 37 years later, I think now. I was able to speak a little bit. I want, first of all, to commend the organizers, Grania Barth. In particular, it was a very moving ceremony. They do something similar every year. And also to note, one of the things that I found myself noting in the words I gave was that we may feel that in terms of the progress towards realization of human rights in general, but women's rights in particular, is not linear, and sometimes it feels like maybe we're under pressure to take steps backwards. I feel very much like we're in one of those times at the moment, given events in a global way. And so I think there needs to be, I think this event is very important, that we recognize that it's a work in progress, and that these events symbolize something much bigger than even the event itself. So I was very appreciative of the effort and the event that took place last Friday. And I was also able to note that one of the tragedies of an event like this is it means that we need to pause and appreciate and think about these things in the everyday lives that we lead. And one of the everyday things that was not exactly every day, but one of the things I was able to be involved in was the musical at the Lester Center put on by the high school. And I want to recognize a longtime colleague, Alison O'Toole, for the work that she put into that and the work she's put into it since I first started working with her back in 1994. And in the years since, literally dozens of these productions, and this was the last one as she is retiring. And it was memorable, and it was immensely enjoyable to be a part of it. And in particular, just the sheer joy of the young people, not only performing, but also playing in the pit with the orchestra. It was a very enjoyable, impressive event, and I was honored to be a part of it.
Excellent. Any other comments? Councillor Cunningham.
I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention that on the weekend, the number of volunteers in that for Winterfest and the Sail Pass and everything else. It was enjoyed by quite a few people in the community, and the fireworks, the whole weekend was phenomenal. There was so much going on the weekend, but even with Winterfest, it was crunch time for a lot and volunteers and everything like that. So I take my hat off to
I agree. What I love about the way your minds work is you just worked your way down my list. I had every one of those on the list, and you did a better job than I would have done. Thank you very much. And I just want to echo the loss of Jean in archives, huge. The well-deserved retirement of Alison O'Toole is another big loss in a very different way. I'm assured there's lots of talent coming up behind her, but I can tell you that a number of my children danced on her stage or were directed by her. And absolutely, Winterfest, huge volunteer effort that the community really values. So it's great to see it coming. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Councillor Randhawa, Councillor Adey, all in favor? Any opposed? The meeting is adjourned.